Hey, hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of The Limitless Show. Today, my guest and I will be talking about using mindfulness to overcome anxiety. So if that sounds interesting to you, definitely have a listen. I'm really excited to introduce you to my guest today. We met actually while we were traveling. We met in Cambodia, which is absolutely crazy. And we haven't had much contact since then, but recently I've been seeing a lot of her work that she's doing on mindfulness and everything like that. And I thought, you know what? I have to have her on the show. So thank you so much for being here, Cristel. Welcome to the Limitless Show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure.
So basically, for those of you that are new to watching the show, the Limitless Show is where I bring a new guest on every single week and we talk about a limitation that person has had in their life and how they've overcome it, in the hopes that if you're struggling with the same thing, you can overcome it too. I was talking to Cristel and she had loads of amazing ideas that she wanted to talk about, and I'll definitely probably be bringing her on again to talk about those. But the one that really resonated with me, and I think will resonate with a lot of people, is struggling with anxiety. And she uses mindfulness. So I thought it was a great conversation that we could have today. So that is the topic of the conversation. So first of all, Cristel, what I want to ask is, how did your anxiety limit you?
So I guess I kind of had a sort of generalized anxiety disorder where it was in response to maybe small things that were not like big dangers or anything truly kind of scary, but I would just have these kind of spirals of fear that would kind of come up from, nothing truly kind of scary. So for example, I would have panic attacks at work, and which would mean that I'd be crying outside and not being able to do my work. And one of the other kind of scary things I always think about now is just how petrified I was of getting on trains and just like traveling from A to B. Like I used to visit my partner in Leeds and just really worry that, if something terrible happened, something terrible, whatever that means, who would be there to protect me? Like what would happen, and kind of catastrophizing the situation. And I guess the way that was limiting me was I've always had like big dreams about moving abroad and going backpacking and like just, living your best life. And when I realized that I had this fear, and it kind of came out of nowhere, like there was, no real sort of triggering moment. It just maybe growing up, changing jobs and all that kind of thing, it just started to develop. I just started to realize that, maybe those dreams weren't for me. Like I wouldn't be able to have that life. I wouldn't be able to go backpacking. I wouldn't be able to move to Australia or move to, all these tropical destinations that I'd always dreamed of, because I was too scared to get on a train to Leeds. So that's kind of how it limited me in my life at that time.
Yeah. And look at you now, living in Australia. You've been backpacking. Like, I'm so proud of you. I think that's the thing. A lot of us do have these problems in our life or these limitations, and they think, well, maybe that's just me. Maybe that's just the way that I am. And the thing is, you don't have to be that way. There's always another option. You just have to work a bit harder or look differently or, work on yourself. What does your life look like now? How is it different?
Well, I'm very pleased to say that my life it's awesome. It sounds kind of cheesy, but I feel like I'm living my best life. And, although some days I still might experience a little bit of anxiety and there's like a little glimpse of it, it has not defined me. It has not dictated my decisions. And those worries and those fears that I had about not being able to do all the things that I wanted to do, like go backpacking, travel the world, move to a different country, start a new life, like launch a business, do all those things that I dreamt of. I've done them. I'm in Melbourne now. I'm originally from the UK, so that was, a big move for me. We went backpacking, which is where we met you guys. And it was just, I just kind of feel like I've moved past that limit. And I don't know, it's a proud moment to kind of look back and think, I once didn't think this would be possible for me, but it is.
Yeah, you should be proud. It's amazing that what you've accomplished. So well done you. What I want to ask though is, we are going to be talking about mindfulness. And for those people who don't know what mindfulness is, in your words, what is mindfulness?
I understand that mindfulness can come across super vague and a bit abstract. And I myself have been like Googling it, many times and just trying to figure out what it actually means. And I think when I first discovered it, I didn't even really know that what I was practicing was mindfulness. But I guess how I would define it now is the practice of paying attention to something in the present moment without judgment. So I guess there's two kind of elements there. It's creating an awareness around something that might be, your body, your thoughts, your surroundings. And then there's also the non-judgment part, which is an acceptance around what it is that you notice when you are being aware. That's kind of how I would define it in the simplest of terms. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, no, completely. So with your anxiety, how did you use mindfulness to help you to overcome this?
It was kind of applying those things of firstly gaining an awareness. So I guess when you're an anxious person, you have these thoughts about life or your surroundings or, what's happening in your day, and they could spiral easily into a panic attack. But I practiced gaining an awareness of those thoughts almost as like a separate entity to me, of like, I'm having these thoughts that are causing me to feel anxious, rather than like, I'm anxious, the world's gonna like fall apart, not seeing it as a part of me, but seeing it as, these are the thoughts that I'm having right now. So gaining that awareness to begin with of what was happening and paying attention to how my body was responding to those thoughts, taking that pause, taking in the information, and then making a decision with that information. So for example, heart palpitations, like that's one of the main things that people experience when they're feeling anxious. I, as an anxious person, or my anxiety would say to me, oh my God, you're having heart palpitations. It means something terrible is about to happen. You're about to have a panic attack and this is terrible, like panic, panic, panic. But mindful me would kind of almost have a conversation with that anxiety and say, you're having heart palpitations. That is a natural reaction to perceived danger. It's normal. There's nothing to worry about. There's nothing wrong with your body or your mind. And it's totally fine. You've been here before. You've survived it. And you'll survive it again. It's really nothing to worry about. So that's also that kind of compassionate side of the acceptance of, okay, this is what I've noticed is going on. And it's totally okay. I think as well as anxious people, sometimes we have this like vicious cycle of like being anxious about being anxious, which just kind of makes it worse.
Yeah.
When you're like, oh my God, I'm feeling anxious. And then you're like, it's bad that I'm anxious. People are going to think I'm crazy. And like, I'm not going to be able to do this because I'm anxious. And, it's just this awful vicious cycle. So that kind of second part around the acceptance and the compassion and applying that kind of takes away that additional layer of fear and anxiety that we put on ourselves, of just kind of saying, it's totally fine to feel these feelings. Everybody feels them and you're going to be okay. So kind of almost like soothing a child, like having a conversation with anxiety, which doesn't have like, it's not rational.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of self-compassion and finding that second voice of, kind of settling it and actually being realistic with the situation and really being like logistic and saying, look, it's okay. This has happened before. You can handle it. It's normal. Other people feel this way. And it is really realizing that a lot of our actions, or all of our actions and all of our feelings, first come from our thoughts. We can't feel anxious without first thinking anxious thoughts. We can't be angry without first having angry thoughts, because you can't be angry and think happy thoughts. So it's all about stopping them thoughts, or, just realizing those thoughts are there. Yeah. Is there any ways to actually practice mindfulness? How do you practice it in times when you're not anxious?
So I guess there's lots of different ways. There's like formal mindfulness practices like meditation, which is like an intense, it's not always intense, but it can be an intense way of practicing exactly what you were saying about kind of observing your thoughts and not accepting them as facts about life. So like if you're having an angry thought, think, oh, I've just had this thought about this thing, but not necessarily letting that become a feeling and then becoming angry. So meditation is a very intense way of doing that, of sitting in, I mean, there are lots of different styles, but one of the styles that I do is kind of like Zen meditation, which is all about thought observation and just like watching thoughts and being like the neutral observer. And then there's more informal mindfulness practices, which is just kind of noticing things in your everyday life. You can incorporate it into your daily routine, like brushing your teeth and not letting your mind fast forward to the future and rewind to the past. I think as humans, we have this tendency to think about the future and worry and plan and problem solve before something has even happened. And then also worry about the past and ruminate and shoulda, woulda, coulda, all of that sort of thing. Whereas if we practice informal mindfulness, like, you know, when you're brushing your teeth, actually think about what you're doing and like be in the present moment and control your thoughts and don't let your thoughts control you. It kind of teaches us to then, when we're in a situation where our thoughts are kind of coming in and they're like, this is scary, this is bad, like you might have a panic attack, like not letting that thought take you away and just going, okay, like I'm in the present moment, that is just a thought and I'm not gonna like entertain it. I'm just gonna focus on what's going on around me and focus on what I have control over right now. So there's lots of small ways that we can practice that in our daily routine, such as, you know, eating your food mindfully and enjoying the flavors and engaging all of the senses throughout our day, kind of bring us back to the present moment and ground us.
I love that. I really do. You yourself are currently practicing as a mindful coach, and I can see a lot of your stuff on Facebook, and I'll definitely put all of your details in the description below if anyone is interested who is watching this. But is there anything that you come about a lot or people struggle with a lot to do with maybe anxiety and mindfulness that you could spread some light on or help people with to do with mindfulness?
I think people almost become anxious or worried about how they practice mindfulness. Like I get it a lot that, you know, I want to practice mindfulness because I know that, you know, I'm dealing with stress levels and anxiety, but then, you know, if I don't tick it off my list, then I'm like, oh, like you failed again at practicing mindfulness. And I think it is natural. Like that is just the internal conversation that we're always having with ourselves of like, you should have done this or you should have done that. But I think bringing back that kind of compassionate side of just like, mindfulness is not a thing to tick off your list, and it doesn't matter if you didn't get round to the meditation that you said you were going to do, or, you know, the mindful walk that you promised yourself. Like, don't punish yourself even more about your practice of mindfulness. It is a practice. It is not something that you master straight away, and there is no mastering it. It's just life is the practice of mindfulness. So I would say that comes up a lot, and I definitely used to struggle with it myself. My advice to people would be just be compassionate with the practice of mindfulness. If you get round to it, then great. If you don't, then that's also totally fine. Like, just be kind to yourself.
Compassion is really important when it comes to learning new things as well, especially with things, I think, with mindfulness and meditation. You can become frustrated with yourself, especially when you're meditating and all these thoughts are coming in your head, and most people sit there like, oh, I shouldn't be having these thoughts, I'm meant to be thinking of nothing. But something that I came across that really helped me, and someone said, if you're meditating and a thought comes in, accept it and then let it go. The more you try and like resist that thought, the more it's going to persist. So you've got to just accept that it's there, then let it go. Like you said, you don't need to feed them thoughts. You don't need to play with them thoughts. You don't need to like go along with those thoughts, but you can accept that they're there and then let them go. And that's the same with your anxious thoughts as well. Not everyone is just cured of anxiety. Like, you're still going to be anxious about things. Like, it's just inevitable, because that's the way we are built as humans. From when we were back in the Stone Age, we had to be anxious about what's around the corner, or who's going to kill us, or where are we going to get our next food. It's like in our genes, it's in our cells, it's in our DNA. So there's always going to be something you're going to be anxious about. But what you've got to do is, like you said,
hear that thought, see if it's actually rational, and then let it go if it's not.
Exactly. And I think the practice of mindfulness, the practice of watching those thoughts is not like, oh no, a thought has come into my head, I have failed at meditating, or I have failed at mindfulness. It is literally it's being mindful. It's noticing that your mind has wandered and that possibly this anxious thought is kind of taking you on a bit of a ride. And then you just kind of notice that and you go, okay, it's taken me to here. It's changed my focus to this anxious feeling or this anxious thought. I've noticed. Cool. Now I'm going to return my focus to what it is I want to focus on, and focus on something that is more beneficial for me right now in this moment, which is, I'm going to be okay, or, I'm spending time with my family and I should be enjoying it. Having like full control of your mind all the time. It's paying attention to when your thought is maybe taking you in a direction that you don't want to go, noticing that, and then just like redirecting that thought to somewhere more useful and more beneficial for you and for your mind.
Yeah, because it is said, like, if you have negative thoughts, there's going to be negative outcomes because you're going to show up in a way that's negative. Whereas being more mindful, it doesn't mean you have to be really positive and like everything's amazing, but it's just something that's more productive for you, a thought that is more productive, a thought that you can act upon that is going to benefit your day, not worsen your day. Because especially when you don't know about mindfulness or challenging your thoughts, because that's what mindfulness seems to me, is like challenging your thoughts. When I was younger, if I woke up and I was in a bad mood, then I'd stub my toe, and then I'd miss the bus, and then like these things spiral because you're in this kind of bad mindset and you're just going through your day like, oh. But you can kind of reverse your day at any time. You can kind of, turn it 180 and have a bit of a better day by challenging the thoughts that you're going to have and being a bit more positive.
Definitely. I think I had a coach who said to me that we like to be proven right, and that kind of applies as well when we wake up in the morning and we're like, oh, like I'm gonna have a bad day today. And like you've had that thought, like whether you consciously made that decision or not, you then want to prove yourself right that you are going to have a bad day. And it's almost like you look out for the negative things and you go about your day and you're like, I told you I was going to have a bad day. And it's like, it's so silly because obviously you don't want to have a bad day, but subconsciously you want to be right that what your initial thought about the day, was right. So we do have the power to change, the outcome of our day and how we feel and how we kind of show up by just kind of being a bit more intentional about those thoughts first thing in the morning. So I guess that's why meditation and that kind of thing is useful early. So you can be intentional and kind of go, I'm going to have a good day. And then you prove yourself right that you are going to have a good day.
Yeah. Is there any other ways that you practice mindfulness yourself?
I guess I practice it in everything that I do. I think I meditate daily, and that's sometimes really hard. But I don't punish myself if it doesn't go well, or I fall asleep, or my mind wanders elsewhere. So that's probably my like kind of formal mindfulness. I think whenever I'm struggling with something, so sometimes I still have anxious thoughts that come up. I really break them down. So, whether it's an anxious thought or a feeling about a situation, I go through a whole like self-coaching process of, okay, here's the circumstance, here's the thought that I'm having about this circumstance, and what's the result that I want to get. So that's how I practice it, like quite often, by playing around with those thoughts that I know I have the power to change to get a different result. So that's kind of something I do in terms of journaling and trying to kind of switch off a little bit, like going for walks. It's not easy for me at all. I'm quite like, I guess, because of my work as well, trying to build a business online. I'm always on my phone, I'm always like on my laptop. So always being fed information and entertainment and distraction. And I think the best way that we can manage our mind and practice mindfulness is by like not receiving so much information and just kind of having a little bit of a pause, and just allowing our minds to breathe and just being with ourselves. So I think, going on walks where I'm not on my phone all the time, or having a conversation with someone where I'm actually listening rather than thinking about what I'm going to say next.
are some of the ways that I like to practice it in my daily life.
Last couple of final questions is, I want to know what you would say to your past self, the person who couldn't get on the train to see her boyfriend because she was anxious, who thought she could never travel because she had anxieties. What would you say to that person?
I would say thank you, because she believed that this was not going to define her, despite being told you'll probably be anxious for the rest of your life, which was a big blow. And yeah, I just want to thank her for being so optimistic that, like, okay, I haven't always been anxious, so surely I can untrain my brain to not hold me back and to persevere as well. I was doing so much research, insomnia fueled nights, kind of how to fix how to fix anxiety, all these different things. Nothing worked for a while, and then eventually it started to. So I would say, keep doing what you're doing, and keep going, because eventually it's going to work, and you'll be fine.
And what would you say to someone who's just struggling with anxiety? What would you say to them?
I would say your anxiety doesn't define you. It's a part of you. It's one of the voices that you have, but it's not your only voice. I would say talk to it, befriend your anxiety, like be compassionate with it, and just build that relationship with that version of you that is anxious, and be compassionate with it, and be compassionate with yourself. Like, it's okay to be anxious. We're all anxious. It's okay that you've had these thoughts, and it's going to be okay, and we'll get through it. So just to learn to have that conversation with yourself, and also get support. Like, there's absolutely no shame in speaking to people. I would say talking to people was one of the things that helped me the most, because it's like that level of that additional layer of, I'm anxious, and it's a really bad thing to be anxious, until I started to talk to people and I realized a lot of people are anxious, and most people experience something similar to me. So yeah, talk to people, and you'll find out that it's normal, and there's nothing wrong with it, and it'll be fine. You'll get through it.
We live in a great time where mental health is like being more spoken about, and it's not a sin to have it, and you shouldn't be ashamed to have it, because a lot of it is natural behavior. But I think it's a magical day when you realize that you can be in control of your thoughts. A lot of us go through a lot of our lives, until we obviously realize, but we go through a lot of our lives just doing what our brain tells us, or doing what it says in our head, or acting the way that our first thought is. You are not in control, or you are not to blame for your first thought in your head. You are to blame for what you do after your second thought about it. You are to you can take control. And I think it's a magical thing. Like, even if you have these thoughts, you don't have to act upon them. Like, you can rethink, you can kind of reframe, you can have a different perspective on your thoughts and on your life. And I think it's a magical moment when you actually realize that you are completely in control of what you are thinking.
Totally. And those thoughts literally have a direct effect on physical things as well. I guess, back to what we were saying around those thoughts will then create your feelings. So if you're panicking, then your heart will start to race, because you're telling your body that there's something to panic about. So then your body kind of prepares for danger. So I completely agree with you. I genuinely also believe it's a magical feeling to realize that we have that amount of control. Like, our bodies and our minds are they're not in the driving seat like we are. We can take control. Also, I think anxiety can be an amazing thing, because it can push us. Like, it's pushed me to learn so much about my brain and so much about other people, and I probably wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. I definitely wouldn't be doing if it wasn't for anxiety. So I'm almost grateful for it, and I don't resent it for that. I'm happy. So I think people should befriend it, and almost be proud that you are that kind of person, that you are sensitive and open. And I think it can be a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be I have anxiety, that is bad. Because also a lot of our feelings are giving us a direction to go. If you're uncomfortable where you are, your body will tell you, your mind will tell you, then you can make a new direction. And I was listening to this amazing podcast yesterday on Jay Shetty's podcast, and he was interviewing a guy, and he was saying how every year he writes down his fears and his anxieties, and he picks one of them to overcome them. And he uses that as like a guide to do that next thing, because the things that you are most anxious about or fearful about are normally the things you should actually be doing, because you're worried or anxious about them for a reason. You're normally worried because you don't want them like to go badly if you do them. But if you never do them, it's never going to happen. So I would suggest writing down a list of your anxieties, because you may come to realize that a lot of your dreams and your hopes and your ambitions are on that other side of that particular anxiety. Like yours was maybe traveling, but after you thought that, you're now living a life that you wanted to live. But if you didn't, you would still be stuck in that kind of anxious hole of not growing and being the person you wanted to become.
Definitely. Yeah, I think that's a really great tip, and I completely agree. I think the best things are on the other side of fear, whether it's anxious fear or just, general fear that we all experience. But yeah, labeling them and saying, like, for me, I was scared to travel around the UK, and I was like, that is a fear of mine, and kind of going through that process of like, okay, I'm not going to let this dictate whether I travel or not, and overcome it.
Have you got any final words on this topic of conversation, mindfulness and anxiety?
I love mindfulness. I'm really passionate about it, and I feel like in this conversation we've like kind of barely scratched the surface of what being mindful can allow you to achieve in life. I think like part of what I do is not just supporting with managing thoughts, but it's then actually doing all the things that you really want to do. So like I support women to achieve the life of their dreams. So it isn't just about surviving, it is really about thriving. So I think if you're feeling anxious right now and you have dreams and things that you think that maybe are not possible for you, I guess I'm proof that it is, and it is possible for you. And just become curious about it. Become curious about mindfulness. It's not as scary and abstract as it sounds. So yeah, find out, look it up, have a look on my Instagram. Like I share a few things here and there. Yeah, just become curious. That's what I did.
Yeah, if you have been inspired or you are curious, I will put all of Cristel's details in the description below. So make sure you check it out. And to all of you watching, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you being here and on this journey with us. And Cristel, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you. If you have enjoyed this video, make sure you like it, put a comment in the comments, subscribe, and hit that bell button so you never miss an episode of The Limitless Show. I will see you all very soon. And once again, thank you so much.